She said she was too busy this year. Her exact words. No apology. No hesitation. Christmas used to mean something between us. The same playlist humming through her old record player, the smell of sweet potato pie filling the house, and her laughter bouncing off the walls like light itself. But this year it was just me. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that follows when love becomes a voicemail. My name is Aaliyah Green. I'm 32, a nurse practitioner, the kind who never really takes time off, even when she should. My patients call me Sunshine. My mother used to call me her little achiever. I guess somewhere along the way, I achieved my way into her distance. I moved out of our old neighborhood 6 years ago. The same one she swore I'd never leave. The same one where porch talk was louder than dreams. She said I changed. That I became one of them. I said I was just trying to breathe easier. Now, breathing feels heavier. The house around me was filled with everything she taught me to love. Mahogany furniture polished until it gleamed, gold-rimmed glassware catching the light of the fireplace, and a half-finished wreath that still smelled faintly of pine. I tied a silk ribbon around it anyway. She'd always said red made everything feel alive. When I sat down to eat, the chair across from me stayed empty, her chair. I placed a plate there anyway. Fried catfish, cornbread, collard greens. The way she made it. The way I learned by watching, not measuring. And as the snow fell outside, I heard her voice in my head, soft and teasing. You always use too much butter, baby. I smiled despite myself. I should have been angry that she didn't come, that she didn't even try. But anger never healed anything. Instead, I did what I always do when something hurts. I fixed what I could. So I cleaned. I folded blankets. I lit a candle that smelled like cinnamon and citrus. I poured a glass of wine, though it didn't taste right without her laughter to fill the air. Then I sat by the window, the city glowing faintly beyond the snow. Somewhere out there, my mother was probably sitting in her own house, the one I grew up in, the one she swore she'd never sell. The one she worked herself to the bone to keep. A house too proud for help. Too stubborn for softness. But I knew the truth. The cracks in the walls weren't just paint. The roof needed fixing. And the loan notice she tried to hide behind the refrigerator door, I saw it last time I visited. That was 6 months ago. The same day she told me not to worry about grown folk business. So I didn't argue. I waited. And that night, Christmas Eve, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and stared at the numbers for a long while. Love isn't always words or warm hugs. Sometimes it's a wire transfer. I didn't call her. I didn't need to. Because the next morning, when the mailman dropped an envelope at her door, she'd know. She'd see my handwriting in the note. She'd see the balance marked paid in full. And maybe, just maybe, she'd understand what love looks like when pride won't let it speak. Mornings after Christmas always feel suspended. Like the world is still wrapped in leftover light. The snow outside my apartment hadn't melted yet, coating the street below in that pure, undisturbed white, the kind that makes even the city seem gentle. I poured myself coffee, the aroma mingling with traces of vanilla from last night's candle. The soft hum of jazz floated through the air. Ella Fitzgerald, the same record Mama used to play when she braided my hair on Sunday mornings. I should have been resting. But I don't know how to do rest. Not really. My life has always been about motion. Tending, fixing, saving. For everyone but myself. At the clinic, my hands never stop moving. Bandaging wounds, calming children, listening to stories that sound too much like my own, people doing their best just to stay afloat. It's strange how healing others can make you forget your own cracks. I arrived early as usual. The hallways smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender, a small luxury I allowed myself by sneaking in air fresheners when no one was looking. My coworkers said I was too fancy for a community clinic. But maybe I just needed something soft in a world that kept hardening. Morning, Dr. Green. One of the nurses greeted with a tired smile. Morning, I said, pulling my coat tighter. Let's make it a good one. She nodded. You always say that. Because I needed to. For both of us. The day unfolded in steady rhythm. Vitals, prescriptions, goodbyes. Every patient reminded me of something my mother taught me about grace. She never had much money, but she gave more than anyone I knew. A pot of soup for a sick neighbor. A ride for someone stranded in the rain. And yet, she'd never accept help in return. Not even from me. That part always stung the most. The distance she built out of pride. Around lunchtime, I pulled out my phone, almost out of habit. No message. No missed calls. Just a few photos from coworkers celebrating with their families. I scrolled through them anyway, pretending it didn't hurt. When I finally set my phone down, I caught my reflection in the clinic's window. Hair tied back neatly, pearl earrings subtle against my skin, the faintest trace of tiredness beneath my eyes. Mama always said I was put together, as if perfection could ever fill an empty space. Later that evening, I went home to leftovers and silence. I reheated dinner, sat at the kitchen island, and stared at the tiny blinking light on my answering machine. One new message. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, unsteady but familiar, like a song half forgotten. Aaliyah. I got the letter. A long pause. Then a shaky laugh. You didn't have to do that, baby. You didn't have to. Her voice broke softly, then quiet, then the sound of her breathing, the kind that carries both gratitude and guilt. I'm proud of you, she said finally. Always have been. I didn't know how to say it without losing something. But you've always been stronger than me. The message ended there. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the silence fill me until it softened. Love doesn't always come with the words you want. Sometimes, it arrives late, trembling, half-wrapped, still enough to change everything. I picked up my mug again, the steam curling like forgiveness between my hands. Maybe next year, I whispered. And somehow, it didn't feel impossible. 2 days after Christmas, I heard a knock at the door. Not a soft, uncertain knock, but 3 sharp ones. The kind that carried history. When I opened it, she stood there. My mother. Wrapped in her old gray coat, snow melting on her shoulders, her eyes darting around like she wasn't sure she'd come to the right place. Aaliyah, she said, voice low. You got a minute? I just nodded and stepped aside. The faint scent of her perfume, the same jasmine one she's worn since I was 10, drifted into the apartment, wrapping itself around every memory I'd tried to tuck away. She walked in slowly, taking in everything. The marble countertop, the velvet couch, the framed degrees on the wall. I saw it in her eyes, that flicker between pride and resentment. You did all this yourself? She asked, setting her gloves on the counter. Yes, I said. Must be nice, she murmured. Having money for things like this. It was meant as a joke, maybe. But it landed like a slap. I forced a smile. Can I get you something to drink? Tea, she said, still scanning the room. If it's not the expensive kind. I froze for half a second, then reached for the kettle. The porcelain cups clinked softly, the same ones she gave me years ago when I first moved out. She'd said, every woman needs something delicate in her home. Now, she wouldn't even look at them. I got your message, I said finally. I'm glad you called. She sat down, hands folded tight. You didn't have to pay off my house, Aaliyah. You made me look small. I turned slowly, staring at her across the table. Small. She nodded, eyes cold now. I've worked for that house my whole life. I didn't need saving like some charity case. My throat tightened. It wasn't about saving, Mama. It was about giving back. You taught me everything I know. She scoffed. And I taught you to stand on your own 2 feet. Not to buy love with your paycheck. That one hit deep. The room felt heavier. The only sound was the faint tick of the gold-rimmed clock above the fireplace. She looked around again, eyes softening for a moment, then hardening twice as fast. All this luxury, these fancy things. It doesn't hide the fact you forgot where you came from. I swallowed hard. I remember everything. Every night you stayed up working. Every meal you skipped so I could eat. That's why I did it. Her jaw tightened. You should have asked me. You would have said no, I whispered. Exactly. We sat there, silence pressing down like snow. I could see the storm behind her calm, the mix of pride, pain, and a love that didn't know how to speak kindly. Finally, she stood. I didn't raise you to throw your money around like it means something. I stood too. You raised me to take care of what matters. Even when it doesn't say thank you. For a second, her mask cracked. I saw the tears she refused to let fall. But she turned away before I could reach her. At the door, she paused. Next time, just send a card. The door clicked shut. I didn't chase her. Didn't cry. I just sat back down, staring at the untouched tea. Love shouldn't hurt like this. But sometimes, pride speaks louder than gratitude. The sound of the door closing stayed with me long after she left. There's something final about silence. Something that feels heavier than anger. I sat there for a while, staring at the empty teacup she'd barely touched. The faint steam rising from it curled like smoke, dissolving into the air. Soft, fragile, gone. Mama always said pride was what kept her standing. I never realized it's also what kept her from reaching. I picked up her cup and washed it gently, even though it didn't need it. The rhythm of running water felt grounding, like the one thing I could still control. My reflection stared back at me from the window above the sink, the city lights flickering behind me like a heartbeat. Her words echoed in my head. You made me look small. It wasn't true. But it felt true to her, and maybe that was enough to hurt. I didn't sleep much that night. The wind outside pressed against the glass, soft and rhythmic, like it was reminding me of something I couldn't yet name. By dawn, I'd stopped replaying the argument. I'd stopped wondering what I could have said differently. Instead, I started thinking about what love really costs, and what it takes to let someone feel strong while being helped. At the clinic, the next day passed slower than usual. I moved through patients like a shadow, efficient, polite, but distant. Even the kids noticed. Miss Aaliyah, one little girl said, tugging on my sleeve, "You look sad." I smiled, just enough to reassure her. "Maybe a little tired, sweetheart." She handed me a sticker shaped like a star. "For when you forget, you shine." I held on to that sticker longer than I should have. After hours, I stayed behind, sitting alone in the break room. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, but in my mind, I could hear Mama's voice again. Strong, stubborn, layered with love she didn't know how to give softly. I opened my phone and scrolled to her contact. My thumb hovered over call, then moved to text. But what could I say? Sorry for paying your mortgage? Sorry for loving you wrong? No words felt right. So instead, I went to the place that always cleared my head, the old bookstore on Maple Avenue. The one with creaky floors, faint jazz, and a coffee machine that hissed like a secret. As I wandered through the aisles, I found a small journal with a linen cover. On the first page, there were words printed in gold. Love endures quietly. I bought it. That night back home, I sat at my desk, the same one she'd given me when I got my first job, and opened the journal. I began writing her letters. Not to send. Not yet. Just to say the things we never could in person. Dear Mama, I wrote. You taught me strength looks like survival. I'm learning it can also look like peace. The candle beside me burned low, its light softening the edges of the room. Outside, snow drifted past the window, slow and deliberate, like forgiveness finding its way through the air. For the first time in days, I exhaled fully. Maybe she wasn't ready to hear my heart yet. But that didn't mean I'd stop speaking it. Sometimes love takes time to echo back. And I could wait. A week passed before I decided to send something. Not a message. Not a call. Something quieter. Something that wouldn't bruise her pride. On Sunday morning, I woke early. The city was still asleep, snow laying low across the streets like a blanket no one dared to disturb. I made tea jasmine the way she likes it, and let it steep while I wrapped a package in plain brown paper. Inside was the linen journal. The one that said, Love endures quietly. I'd filled the first few pages with small, ordinary memories. Nothing heavy. Nothing that could be mistaken for pity. Just moments. Remember when we used to hum along to the radio during chores? You always said a woman should never leave the house with chipped polish. You made struggle look graceful. I tied it with a silk ribbon, one she'd left behind years ago when she helped me move. Ivory, frayed a little at the edges, still smelling faintly of her perfume. Then I slipped a note inside. No return address needed. You've already got my heart. I mailed it quietly on my way to work. The clinic was busy that day, end-of-year checkups, flu shots, the usual rush of people trying to start the new year on the right foot. But my thoughts kept drifting back to that small package on its way through the cold. Would she open it? Would she read it? Would she recognize that it wasn't guilt I was sending? It was love in translation. At lunch, I sat alone in the staff lounge, scrolling through photos on my phone. Old pictures of her, laughing in her garden, holding up her favorite mug, dancing barefoot in the kitchen to Marvin Gaye. I didn't realize I was smiling until a coworker walked by. "You look peaceful," she said softly. I shrugged. Maybe I am. The peace was fragile, but it was there, like sunlight sneaking through heavy curtains. That evening, I took the long way home. The streets glowed with the faint gold of street lamps reflecting on wet snow. My hands were cold, but my chest was warm, a quiet sense of knowing that I'd done the right thing, even if she never said a word. When I reached my apartment, I saw it waiting by the door, a small envelope slipped under the mat. No address, no stamp, just my name. The handwriting was hers. Inside a card. Cream-colored. Elegant. The kind she used to send when words came easier. "Got your package," it said. I'm not much of a writer, but I read every page. Next time come visit. You can bring your fancy tea. My breath caught halfway between a laugh and a sob. She'd never been good with apologies. But that was hers, wrapped in pride, softened by time. I placed the card on my mantel beside a small framed photo of us. The candlelight flickered against the glass, catching her smile like it was still alive in the room. That night, I poured 2 cups of tea. One for me, one for her. And even though she wasn't there, it felt like she was. When she said, "Next time come visit," I read it 10 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to. So that weekend I did. No warning. No calls. Just me, a box of her favorite pastries, and a heart trying its best not to break open too fast. Her house looked smaller than I remembered. The porch creaked the same way it always had, the chipping paint curling at the corners like time's little signature. The wind carried the scent of pine and something sweet, like the cinnamon candles she loved burning year-round. I knocked once, then twice. The door opened slowly. She stood there in a soft lavender sweater, her gray scarf looped perfectly, still the picture of quiet dignity. Her eyes landed on me, then on the pastry box in my hands. "I didn't order anything," she said flatly. I know, I smiled. I brought them anyway. For a moment, silence stretched between us. Then she stepped aside. "Well, don't just stand there freezing. Come in." The warmth hit me immediately, not just from the air, but from the memories. The living room looked exactly the same. Family photos lining the mantel, the same mahogany table polished to perfection, and the faint hum of Billie Holiday floating from the old record player. I placed the pastries on the counter. "Still like cherry danishes?" She gave me a look that was half disbelief, half affection. "You remembered." "I always do." We sat down across from each other at the small oak table. Steam rose from the crystal teapot between us, curling softly in the air. I watched her hands, steady, graceful, the same hands that once braided my hair before school, that once pulled double shifts without complaint. "I read your letters," she said finally. You write just like your father used to. Always thinking too much." I laughed softly. Guess that's the nurse in me. Always overanalyzing. Her mouth twitched, fighting a smile. "You get that from me." I nodded, eyes softening. And the stubbornness. That made her laugh, a real one this time. Low, warm, unexpected. For a while we just talked. About her garden. About work. About a recipe she'd found in a magazine and planned to improve. No apologies. No big speeches. Just rhythm. The kind of rhythm love takes when it stops pretending to be perfect. Then, as she poured more tea, she said quietly, "You know, I didn't mean what I said. About you making me look small." I looked up surprised. "I just didn't like being reminded I needed help," she continued, voice trembling. "All my life, I've had to fight to stand on my own. And then my own daughter stands taller. It scared me. Tears gathered in my eyes before I could stop them. You never had to stand alone, Mama. Not anymore. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Soft, firm, sure. I see that now. Outside, snow began to fall again, slow and steady. The world seemed to hold its breath for that small moment of peace. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. The silence between us had changed. No longer sharp, no longer cold. Just full. As I helped her clean up, she pointed to the empty cup beside mine and said with a grin, "Next time, bring your fancy tea." "I will," I said, smiling through the lump in my throat. "And maybe I'll bring another surprise." She raised an eyebrow. "You and your surprises." She had no idea how right she was. A few weeks after that visit, I called her again. "Mama," I said, "there's something I'd like to show you. It's close by, only a short drive." She hesitated, the way she always did when she wasn't sure if something was a trick or a gift. "Do I need to dress up?" I smiled. "Maybe a little." The next morning, she stepped out of her house in a charcoal coat and pearl earrings, the same pair she used to wear to Sunday service. She adjusted her scarf with practiced precision, then looked at me suspiciously. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." We drove through the quiet part of town, past old brick buildings and snow-dusted trees, until the car turned down a freshly paved road lined with new signage and soft gold lighting. The letters gleamed under the winter sun. "The Green Wellness Foundation." She blinked. "A foundation?" I parked slowly, heart pounding. "A clinic," I said. "It opens next week." She stared at the building. Large glass windows, clean white walls, and a single brass plaque by the entrance that caught the light like a mirror. Her voice trembled. "Why are you showing me this?" I took a deep breath. "Because it's yours, Mama." Her head turned sharply. "Mine. Named after you. Funded through my practice and a few partners. A place where families like ours can get the care we never had growing up, without worrying about bills or shame." She didn't speak. Didn't move. Just looked at the plaque again. The engraved letters read, "The Helen Green Community Health Center. Founded in honor of resilience, compassion, and a mother's quiet strength." Her hand went to her mouth. Tears pooled instantly in her eyes. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you?" "Because you taught me how to fight for others. Even when you were tired. Even when no one noticed." I smiled softly. "You may not have worn white coats, but you healed people your whole life, Mama. This is just me returning the favor." For a long time she said nothing. Only the sound of her breath mixed with the faint hum of the piano drifting from the lobby, slow, elegant, deliberate. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "You shouldn't have done this." "I wanted to," I said. "And I could." She turned to look at me then, really look. The same woman who once called me reckless, prideful, too ambitious, now stood in front of the building carrying her name, the reflection of her legacy in glass and gold. Her hand found mine. "I used to pray," she said softly, "that you'd have an easier life than I did. I just never thought you'd be the reason others would too." My throat tightened. "That's because you prayed for strength, not ease. And that's exactly what I got." She laughed through her tears, the kind of laugh that comes from deep, aching gratitude. "You always were stubborn. I learned from the best." We walked inside together. The scent of fresh paint and vanilla filled the air, mingling with the warmth of the lights and the faint sparkle of polished glass. Staff nodded respectfully as we passed, calling me Dr. Green. Mama's step slowed. "They know you here?" I smiled. "They work for me." Her lips parted, but no sound came out, just quiet awe. For the first time, she didn't try to fill the silence. She let it sit. And in that silence, something mended. The years of pride, distance, misunderstanding, all softening into something that felt like peace. The morning of the grand opening, I woke before sunrise. The world outside was wrapped in white, snow draped across rooftops, still and sacred, as if the city itself had paused to listen. In the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon tea and jasmine candles filled the air. I stood at the window, watching my breath fog the glass. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed, soft, deliberate, like a heartbeat. Mama was already dressed when I came downstairs. She wore ivory, a wool coat with tiny pearl buttons, the same pair of gloves she'd kept for important days. Her hair was neatly pinned, her earrings small but elegant. She looked like peace wrapped in grace. "You ready?" I asked. She gave a little nod. "I don't know," she said, "but I'll try." The ride to the center was quiet. The car hummed along the frosted road, sunlight bleeding through clouds like melted gold. As we pulled up, the building shimmered against the pale sky, glass walls glowing, snowflakes landing gently on the polished marble entrance. The Helen Green Community Health Center. Inside, everything glowed. Soft gold light flickered across chandeliers. Champagne glasses clinked in the distance. Guests in velvet coats and silk scarves mingled near the piano, where a slow jazz tune floated like a sigh. The air smelled of vanilla and fresh lilies. When Mama stepped inside, the entire room shifted. Conversations paused. People turned, not because they knew who she was, but because they felt it. The quiet authority of a woman who had endured storms and somehow stayed whole. She held my arm tightly as we walked toward the stage. Her steps were slow, measured, the sound of her heels echoing against the marble like small declarations. During the ceremony, the mayor gave his speech. Then the board chair. Applause followed, polite and distant. But when Mama's name was called, the room stilled again. I looked at her. "You don't have to speak," I whispered. She smiled faintly. "I think I do." She approached the podium, her hands trembling just slightly. A spotlight warmed her face. The microphone hummed softly. "I'm not a woman of many words," she began. Her voice cracked on the first syllable but steadied by the second. "I didn't think this day was about me. Not until I saw my name carved into the wall of this place." A hush rippled through the audience. "When my daughter was little," she continued, "I told her to be practical. To find safety, not dreams. I was wrong. She built safety from her dreams." I felt my chest tighten. Her words sank like light through water. She taught me that power doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it forgives. Her gaze found mine across the crowd, steady, unblinking proud. "And today," she said softly, "I'm just here to say thank you." When the applause came, it wasn't thunderous. It was gentle, warm like sunlight, honest like breath. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the piano had gone quiet, I stood alone by the plaque again. The engraved letters shimmered under the chandelier. The Helen Green Community Health Center. I traced her name with my fingertips. "We did it, Mama," I whispered. Behind me, her reflection appeared in the glass. She'd taken off her coat, her pearls glinting softly in the light. "No," she said, smiling. "You did." I turned to her. "You gave me the reason." Outside, snow kept falling, steady, endless, forgiving. And for the first time, I understood something she'd once told me. Love isn't loud. It's lasting.